Hello everyone, Kamatsu here. In this video I have something very exciting to show you that just arrived from Korea. Hard Kernel has come out with a keyboard for the ODROID-GO. This is to be used with emulators like the Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum, and others. I just picked this up today. I haven't even tested it or done anything with it yet. I was just very excited about it and wanted to share it with all of you. So the cool thing about this is it's not just a keyboard. It actually has a real-time clock chip built on. That's what the battery is for. And this allows future applications to keep track of the time, which the ODROID-GO can't do currently. So let me quickly show you how to connect it. It just simply connects that header up to the header on the top. Trying to do this through a camera is probably not the best idea. And there you go. Pops in just like that. And then you can secure it down with these screws that they provide, which are longer than the default screws that come with the ODROID-GO. So you'll remove the two screws that are on the back and then screw in these longer screws into these two holes. And that holds on the keyboard to the back. So that, with the header plugged in, gives you a nice secure fit. So you can type on the keyboard. It's actually pretty easy to type on, nice clicky keys. Even for my big fingers, I can hit the buttons pretty easily. And then you can still play your games and use the normal buttons up here. So that's just a quick overview. Let me show you some of the applications. Alright, that first part I recorded about 4 days ago. And I've spent at least 10 hours using this keyboard with various applications and games on the Commodore 64 emulator that CrashOverride ported over to the ODROID-GO. And I've really enjoyed the experience with this keyboard. It's actually well laid out for its size. You can see that the keys are offset just like on a regular QWERTY keyboard. So somebody like myself, where I touch type on a normal keyboard, I can kind of touch type with this. It's somewhat effective. I mean, obviously it's very small, and these aren't exactly keycaps, they're just the tops of push buttons. But I find it pretty easy to be typing and just know that, oh, you know, if I want to do print, you know, R is right there, and, you know, I just move over 2 to get to I. So that kind of thing is... it makes it feel more natural. A lot of small keyboards, they'll just put all the keys in a line, like Q, A, and Z will be just straight up and down. And that actually makes it a lot harder to type, because if you're on Q and you want S, you naturally go diagonally like that, where when they're straight up and down, it's a different angle. Anyway, it's definitely nice to have it laid out like this, have the number of keys along the top. Now, the way that CrashOverride has mapped this keyboard, and it can be mapped differently for every emulator, is he has hotkeys. Like if you push select, for example, it turns these top keys here, the 1 through 0 number keys, into F keys for use with this emulator. Now, on a real Commodore 64, there's only 8 F keys. There's actually 4 keys, and they can be shifted to 8 different F keys. So F key 10 is actually used to reset the emulator. Now, there are a couple hotkeys that are specific to the Commodore 64 emulator, and I'm going to go over those. And I'm also going to show you some games that use the keyboard, and a couple games that don't use the keyboard that actually use the gamepad, just to show you that you can switch between the two seamlessly. It's just, you can be typing down here and then use the gamepad either as a virtual joystick or as cursor keys. So let's take a closer look. You can see the Commodore 64 BASIC. Now if I start typing, like for example, print hello world, you can see that that works very well. As I said before, I've already spent a lot of time using this keyboard over the last 4 days, and one of the things I did was create a blank disk and then type in some basic programs using the keyboard into the ODROID-GO. So hit the menu key to pull up the menu of disks, And I'll just go down to my disk that I created. And if I do a load, quote, $, quote, comma 8, and hit enter, it'll read the disk, which you saw the little light up there, light. And these are the files that are on this disk. So I'm going to load the first one. And you can kind of hear the click, click, click of the keys as I type things. And I'll just go ahead and list this so you can see what it is. Pretty simple little for loop. And if I run it, it does what it's supposed to do. Now the other programs I have on there, the one called Sketch and Sketch 2, those are actually from a magazine. Oh, actually I want Sketch 2. That I found online for Commodore 64 BASIC programs that you can type in. So you can see that that loaded up just fine. So let me do run. So you can see it just comes up as a blank screen. And if I use the keyboard, I have the program, I changed it to use WASD because that's what I'm used to. But you can see that I can draw kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch. So that's kind of a cool little basic program. And if you want to get out of a basic program that you're running, you just hit escape. And it resets and leaves all the stuff on the screen. But you can use that other shortcut that I mentioned before and hit the F-lock key and the F10 button. And you'll see that it actually resets the emulator. So let's get into some games. So the first one we'll pull up is this one. I've heard that this is really popular with Commodore 64 users, and this gives me the opportunity to show you another shortcut. So if you hold down up and press escape, it'll actually do the loading process for you. So I'm going to just back out a little bit so you can see the keyboard at the same time. So you hold down up, hit escape, and you can see right there that it pretty much typed the loading command for you, and it typed the run command. So it just saves you that typing, which is nice. You can see the lights lit that it's loading. Now, games and applications take just as long to load on the ODROID-GO as they would on a normal Commodore 64. And this is just an artifact of the emulation. It's emulating the 1541 Commodore 64 disk drive. And that disk drive wasn't exactly fast. So it emulates it at the proper speed because it does actually impact some programs that rely on timing to operate correctly. So throughout this video, I'm actually going to cut out a lot of the load times so you guys don't have to sit and wait through it. You can just kind of see the system operating, but it is something to note for the Commodore 64. Alright, so obviously we're finished loading. Camera really doesn't do this justice, but it does look really great on the screen. And we're back to basic. So let me load up a game that is also popular, Ultima 4. And this definitely is a long load time that we'll be skipping. But this game actually uses the keyboard quite a bit. You pretty much can't play this game without a keyboard. I think one of the highlights for the keyboard is being able to do basic programming anywhere. So you can use the Commodore 64 to learn programming wherever you are. It's fairly easy. Or other emulators as the other community developers get those emulators up and running with the keyboard. As of the making of this video, the MXX emulator that Jan ported over has had keyboard support added to it, and also CrashOverride has set up keyboard support in the ODROID-GO common library, so other developers can just use that as a template. But Jan added his keyboard support separately. So later in this video I will show you the MXX emulator just to show you that it is working properly. But also I'll show you how to set up your SD card to work with the Commodore 64 emulator, since there are some extra things you need to do on your SD card to get the Commodore 64 emulator working. There it is. Like I said, the camera is just not doing it justice. It looks very sharp and clear on the screen. So I'm going to just push a button on the keyboard. I've already played this, but my save game is only at the beginning. So I'm going to just push J on the keyboard, which corresponds to the journey onwards there. And that's going to take a second to load. Okay, you can see that it's asking for the Britannia disk, so I'm going to go here, and I've actually labeled the files so that I know which disk is what. And then I'll put on the function lock again and press F1. And for most of this game, you can actually leave the function lock on. It makes it a little bit easier. You can see it's loading my character from the disk, and it'll start here in just a second. Again, this is all related to the Commodore 64 emulator. There we go. So I'm going to just back out a little bit here so you guys can see the keyboard. So the keys for movement are down here, and that's just the way they were mapped on the original Commodore 64. So I'm going to just go over, and then I'll go ahead and go up. As you can see, it's pretty easy to navigate with the keys. So I'm going to go ahead and hit E to enter the castle. And then it's going to ask for the town disk, and this is just like I said, the way this particular game plays. A lot of games only have one disk, so this isn't really a problem. They load up pretty fast. And actually a game I'm going to show you here shortly loads the entire game into memory. It's actually made by another YouTuber, and we'll get to that in a second. You can see this is working really well. And I can just move up here. I know you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm pressing the buttons down here at the bottom of the keyboard to move around. I think the King's Chamber is down here. Oh, no. Sorry, I don't exactly remember where it's at, but you get the idea. You can see it's working really well. So I'm going to just go ahead and reset. So we're back to the basic screen again. So we're going to load up another game here. This one is actually a relatively new game. As you can see, it's from 2017. And this is made by another YouTuber named David from 8-Bit Guys. You should definitely check out his channel. I learned most of what I know about the Commodore 64 from his videos, so I thought it was appropriate to buy this game from him to support him a little bit. So this is actually a real-time strategy game, and it loads the entire game into memory. So there isn't any kind of disk loading delay or anything like that. It's just this initial loading screen that you have to sit through. It takes about a minute to load, which is about average for Commodore 64 games that are any decent size. But then after it loads this one time, there's no more loading screens, which is really nice for this game. You can see that it's working great right there. I'm going to put on the function lock again. So you can see all the people that made it. I'm going to change the difficulty to easy, and then hit F1 to start. And you'll see that it loads, and a lot of Commodore 64 games will do this, where they blink different colors in the background to show that the disk is reading. and that's perfectly normal. Alright, so we're loaded. So this game actually uses the cursor keys to navigate. I mean, you can use the keyboard, there's keys on the keyboard, but you can see that by default the gamepad is set up to be a joystick, so you have to push the select button. That changes it to cursor keys, and then you can actually move around in the game. And you can see that the response time on this game is really great. You can move around very fast. Now, we'll be making a video just on the Commodore 64 emulator, so I'm going to go more in depth into some of these games, but I just wanted to show you some of the games that actually utilize the keyboard so that you can see how they work. So, like, for example, this one, if I go to F3, bulldoze, and I'll just select an area there. Oh, that's too far away. Oh, right. So let me try that again. So I'll just hit, like I said, F3. I'll select the square over there, and hey, that's bulldozed. And you can see that worked out fine. And this is a real-time strategy game, so you can see the time ticking away over there. So the computer enemy that you're playing against is doing other stuff through the game. You can't just sit here and babble on like I am during this video. But this is actually a really fun game, and it is available on David's website. So let's move on to another game. So this will be Space Taxi, which I found to be fairly fun. Alright, so we're loaded, and I'm going to just push the fire button, which, like I said, this acts as your joystick, so the A button is the fire button, and this is your joystick there. And I'll just keep on pushing the fire button to get through that. And you can see that it's loading again. Alright, so we're a little taxi there. And we're going to pick up this guy down here. You gotta kind of fly it, put your gear down, and then go up. There we go. Cleared the level. And it's on to the next level. And he wants to be delivered to pad 1. And you can't actually hit the ceiling. Ooh, close. There we go. And I got paid. So the last emulator that I wanted to show you is the MSX emulator that Jan ported over to the Go and also added keyboard support. So you can see that I'm in the MSX BASIC here. So I'm just going to quickly type a print hello world. There you go. And you can see that the keyboard is working very well with this emulator as well. And other emulators that could benefit from a keyboard will probably get keyboard support added down the road. These are just the ones that are available as of the making of this video. So there's one more thing I want to show you, and it actually requires flashing a different firmware image. And that is, you can see I do a lot of testing, the keyboard support. And this is a firmware package that was made by CrashOverride to turn the ODROID-GO into a keyboard and gamepad for any device with Bluetooth. So right now it's been tested with Android and Apple phones, and it works great. It's also been tested with computers, and it works well there too. So you can see that it just comes up with a basic screen that shows the name of your device. So when you search for Bluetooth devices, this name will show up, and you can connect to it just like any other Bluetooth keyboard or gamepad. And it actually maps all of the keys from the keyboard, just like a regular keyboard, laid out the same. Shift key, Alt, Escape, everything is exactly the same as it is on a normal system. And it maps all of the gamepad keys to that device as well. So you can actually use this, for example, if you wanted to play a game that isn't supported by the ODROID-GO, say PSP for example, you could use the gamepad on your ODROID-GO to play the game on, say, your phone, which you probably have with you anyway. So that's a really cool feature, and I can't exactly show it to you because I'm filming with my phone, but it is something that you can use if you get one of these keyboards. So one more thing that I wanted to mention that you guys might be interested in is the weight. This doesn't really add that much weight to the Go. It is noticeable, but say for example I have my original ODROID-GO here, and this is a second one that I got to do more testing with, and you can see that it just snaps on to the ODROID-GO like that, like I showed you at the beginning of the video, but it really doesn't weigh that much more in comparison. I mean, you can tell that there's some weight here, but it isn't that big of a deal. It definitely doesn't take away from the enjoyment of using the ODROID-GO. So it's just something I wanted to mention there. So the last part of this video is I'm going to show you how to set up the SD card on your ODROID-GO to work with the new Commodore 64 emulator. These instructions are specifically for the Commodore 64 emulator that was published by CrashOverride. Jan, the developer that ported over MSX, has also released a Commodore 64 emulator, but the instructions for that one are a little bit different. I have been using CrashOverride's emulator because it had keyboard support into it prior to the release date, and that's what I've been testing with him. If you're watching this, it's released, so let me show you how that's done. So the first thing you'll need to do is go to the home page for Frodo, which is the emulator that was ported over to the ODROID-GO. We'll include a link in the video description for this, so check that out. And you'll need to download this file, which is the source tarball for Frodo. And that contains the files that we need. And you'll probably need something like 7-zip to open it. I'll include a link to that as well in the description. But if we just right-click on it and save link as, and just save it to wherever you want it, let's just say downloads, and you can see that it's completed there. So let's open this up, and then you just drill down into here until you get to this screen where you can see these files that end in ROM, and those are the files that we need. So what I'd recommend doing is just closing out of the web page. We don't need that anymore. Just take the 4 files, which is these 4, and just drag them to your desktop or whatever location you want, and then close out of 7-zip and close this too. And this is everything we need to set up the SD card for the Commodore 64 emulator that CrashOverride released. I have various ROMs here. I can't help you with where to get ROMs. Google is probably the best resource to find that out. So let's go to the SD card, and you can see that I already have my existing SD card that I've been using. You can see all the different directories here for the different emulators, and you just create a new folder here called C64, just like that. Go into that folder and take all of these files, put them into that folder, and then you're going to want to rename these files, and this is very important. You'll want to remove the space that's between the first part and last part of the name and put a dot there instead. So just do that for each one of these. And that's how it should look. And then once you're done with that, take your ROMs and copy them into the same folder. And you can close out of your ROMs folder. So this is how this folder should look. You also need to go back to the top level of your SD card, go into the Odroid folder, go into Data, and also create a C64 folder here. Now, of course, you'll have to put the .fw file in your firmware directory. You can see that I already have a bunch in here, including the C64 Frodo emulator from CrashOverride, and I will have links in the video description for both this Commodore 64 emulator by CrashOverride, along with the MSX emulator that Jan wrote that also has keyboard support. So take a look in the video description to see those. So thank you for watching this very long video. I hope it was informative and showed off the capabilities of this keyboard. If you enjoyed it and you want to see more of my videos, please subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments section and I'll try to answer all that I can. So thank you again for watching. That's all for now.